For a closer look at that climate meeting, I'm joined now by Changhua Wu. She's Executive Director of the Professional Association for China's Environment. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Now, this is the Biden team's third trip to China this year and John Kerry's second visit. What is the goal this time?
I think as the two leaders during the talk mentioned already, we are literally racing to the COP26, which is going to happen in Glasgow end of November and early December. That's going to be the critical moment for global community to elevate their commitments to fight climate change, of course, in the meantime, to enhance resilience as well. And as the two largest economies in the world, more than ever, the two countries need to work closely together, particularly putting the current efforts, both countries have committed that so far, and put that in the context of the latest scientific report by the UNIPCC body, the sixth assessment report. We are definitely lagging behind, meaning we are literally entering more catastrophic situation if the two largest economies do not really work substantively together rather than just talk about it, just as a positioning themselves, saying, yeah, let's keep the doors open and make sure we talk about the right thing and we just respectively do whatever we could. I think that has to change at this moment as soon as possible. Otherwise, there's no way we're going to win this war against the climate change.
And we certainly saw that was a key takeaway in terms of the tone of the meetings. What were some other highlights that stood out to you from these meetings?
Well, I think, you mentioned that this is John Kerry's second trip this year. And so back in April in Shanghai, during his first trip to Shanghai, and there is a bilateral joint statement and officially announced. If you read it carefully, actually, through the wordings there, I call that all politically correct language there, but there's no substance in terms of how the two countries can really work together. It's more around about respectively, we should do this, we're going to do that, and all the things we all know actually about clean energy, energy efficiency, buildings, transportations, or technologies, or whatever. So that's far away, actually, inadequate in terms of what the challenges we're talking about here today. I'm hoping somehow, particularly now with the more scientific body knowledge out there, enhancing the sense of urgency of a crisis there, somehow there will be some changes, if not fundamentally, in terms of Biden administration's foreign policy towards China. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be about joint efforts or collaboration in increasing R&D in terms of industrialization of technologies actually and deploy them. It's about a global supply chain collaboration. So the current Biden administration policy in terms of treating China as a rivalry, as a threat to the U.S. national security, that's totally wrong. Because in the end, there's no one going to win the situation. We have to either win together or lose together.
And it's certainly obviously a lot of people looking at the other bilateral issues and wondering how the U.S. and China will then be able to cooperate on climate change. So then how much progress has been made by these two countries since the Paris Accords?
Well, I think during the Obama administration, I think that was regarded as sort of as a golden time in terms of bilateral collaboration. There were intensive, around a dozen meetings during those 8 years, actually, bilaterally, high level. The top leadership literally working very, very closely, talking to each other closely, and literally jointly, actually, contributed to the success of the Paris Agreement. Since then, afterwards, during the Trump administration, I think the situation totally changed. We all know the U.S., of course, withdrew from the Paris Agreement, and of course, the bilateral collaboration totally sort of collapsed. And now with the Biden administration, hopefully we are going to pick up more and shifting towards more substance, and particularly around the supply chain. We need to figure out how to work together.
And to that point, we know that there have been comparisons with the disruption that COVID is causing as being a fraction of the disruption that climate change can cause. What's next for the global climate conversation with that in mind?
Well, if you look at the COP26, which is the agenda, actually the goal before the end of this year, and many leaders call that the most critical moment, actually, the most decisive moment for this decade in terms of the commitments, 196 countries are putting together actually on the table in something called the nationally determined commitments, NDCs. as a sort of bottom-up commitments. If we put all those commitments together today, they add up to about 2.4 degrees Celsius to temperature rising target there. As we all know, actually, in the Paris Agreement, the commitment is to control the temperature rise below 2 degrees, and ideally, actually, be below 1.5 degrees Celsius there. So we are not really there at this moment. So on one side, of course, we need to mitigate, reduce the emissions as soon as possible, even taking more aggressive efforts actually to reduce that in this decade and within the 2 decades, if according to the IPCC said, in order to achieve below the 1.5 degrees there. In the meantime, and countries have to invest heavily in resilience because climate change is happening. We're literally living in it, actually, experience all these disasters and the losses there. There's the third part, actually. Developed countries, industrialized countries, are obligated under the Paris Agreement to provide financial support for developing countries, particularly this $100 billion a year is still not delivered yet. So I think, yes, there are many pieces on the table now leading up to COP26, and global community would like to somehow build up the momentum to accelerate these actions or solutions there, but somehow we're definitely lagging behind.